Today, we're going to walk through the process of how a data consumer is going to request access to a data product, how a product publisher can publish data products, manage policies, manage request and approval workflows, and also do some exploration of data protection policies. So, creating masking policies, row filters, and guardrail policies, and how those interact with data products that have been published within the Immuta Marketplace. So the first thing that we'll kind of show here is if I switch over, I have two views here. I have my data product owner or data product publisher who has access to create data products within the marketplace. And then I also have my data consumer who will be coming in. Typically, the persona would be maybe a data analyst or maybe someone that's doing BI type of work where they want to work with some data that they don't currently have access to. So they would be browsing the marketplace in order to gain access to that data right here. So this is my data consumer with the purple border. And they want to work with some healthcare data. There's this genomics clinical trial data that has the data set that they need, right? So just to kind of show you here in Databricks, if I try to run this query against medical claims, it's going to say failed because there's insufficient permissions. Same with medical procedures and some of these other tables and volumes. So I don't have access to this data today. And the same is true here in Snowflake, right? So this is going to be relevant when we request access. We'll eventually gain access, hopefully, to some of these tables. So the first thing we do, we'll take a step back and say, okay, how do these data products become populated here in Immuta? So if I switch over to my data product owner, I can see here, if I want to publish a data product, it's really simple. So I have a few that's already published. I'll kind of walk you through the process though and publish a data product. And the first thing that we're going to do is select a domain, right? So Immuta has this concept of domains, which is really just a way to segment your data into different functional units, organizational units, or lines of business that have unique owners, auditors, and data governors. So classic example is someone that is responsible for finance data products would only be able to manage data sources within that finance domain. So you could have distributed stewardship of your data products across different domains. We're going to work with this clinical trial domain. If I click next, I can go in here and I can select my data sources. You'll note that the data sources are not limited to a single technology. So I can go through and I can select data sources from Databricks. I can select data sources from Snowflake. If I had different other platforms registered, I could use those as well. So a data product can span multiple technologies, and Immuta will handle all of the provisioning of access kind of behind the scenes across all of the different technologies. So I can choose my different tables or assets that I'd like. Another thing to note is a data product doesn't just have to be tables. I have here, for example, a couple of Unity catalog volumes registered. I also have a model, so this nucleotide transformer model. So again, we're not limited to just tables. We could have S3 buckets, we could have models, we could have volumes, again, that span multiple technologies. So if I click next, I'm going to create my data product, and here's where I'll enter the metadata. So I'll give it a name and a description, right? This supports Markdown, right? So we can give a really nice description. I can, put tables, I can put colors in here, links, whatever else I need. And then I can also supply a subject matter expert. So I'm going to say Chris is our SME for this particular data product. And then next, I can specify a request form. So what's really cool is I can either use a pre-made request form. So I have kind of a library of templated forms for clinical trials, finance, different versions, or I can create a new one, right? And with these forms, I can give it a name, and then I can specify different questions. So here's a short answer question. I can have things like drop down or checkbox questions, right? And then supply my different options. And then I can also set the data flow for this request form that says, okay, who is going to do the approval for this data product, right? So I can say in this request form, I can say require approval, yes or no. And then who should be the approval? Is it a specific user? I can specify a user as the approver. Is it a group of users? I could say maybe the fraud analysts or the finance users are the approvers. So this is where we can set up who's going to approve access to the specific data product. And then lastly, I can set a data usage agreement. So we've probably seen these before. These are kind of the terms of conditions that I need to agree to before using this data product. And I can set that here or create a new one. So again, I would expect you would have kind of a templated library of data use agreements that we would use when creating data products. Okay, so if I click through next, I could create my data product. I'm actually going to cancel this because I've already got my data product created here. So I'll discard my changes and I'll show you, I'm going to work with this genomics clinical trial data. So just going to show you, I've got my description. I have the domain, which is clinical trial. I have all the data sources that are associated with this data product that spans Databricks and Snowflake. I have who are my current members, things like that. So switching kind of gears, let's go to my data consumer Remy and let's request access to the data product. So I don't currently have access. I'm going to go in here to the marketplace. I'm going to browse and say, this one looks pretty good. Let me see which tables I'm going to get access to or which assets I'll get access to. So what's really interesting is there's policies in place that are already providing some guardrails, right, around who can access certain tables or data sources within this data product or within Immuta, or the data platforms, I should say. So I have policies that are preventing access to clinical trial imaging. There's a policy that's preventing access to this regulatory data. There are policies preventing access for genomics data. The reason for that is I don't meet, as a data consumer, I don't meet the requirements set forth in that policy to access these data sources, right? So for example, maybe I'm not a genomics researcher, so I'm not allowed to see genomics data. Maybe I'm not a radiologist. I'm not allowed to see clinical imaging data, right? So those are examples of how you can have a data product and also have kind of guardrail policies around it to protect your most sensitive data elements, right? So I can see exactly what's going to happen if I request access and I'm approved. I'm going to get access to these data sources in Immuta. Okay, so I'll go ahead and request access. I'll say here, request access. One thing that's really neat is I can request for myself or on behalf of someone else. So if I'm requesting for someone else on my team, or maybe I'm requesting for a service account or machine or API type of account, or maybe it's like an AI agent or something like that, I can request on behalf of something else. Today, I'm going to request for myself. I'm going to say I need access for my research. Right? So why should I be getting access? I need to provide justification right here. And then have I completed my compliance training? I'm going to say yes, and then agree to the data use agreement. I can view that if I want here. Okay, so I'll submit the request. You can see it's pending. I'll switch over to my data product owner, and I can see here under access requests, I see a new request for Remy. So I'll go ahead and click on this, say, okay, here's the details that Remy provided. They need access for the research. They have completed the training. Once again, I can see what's going to happen when I click this button. This is really something that's unique to Immuta because a lot of tools that are managing data access today, it's done through provisioning access for a role, or maybe it's provisioning access for an Active Directory group, but it provides very little or no visibility into what actual data assets or what actual data sources the user is going to gain access to. If I look here, I can see exactly which tables, volumes, models the user is going to be provisioned for when I click this button. So I'll go ahead and continue to my determination. I can see a few things here. So there's already been this AI-based risk assessment. So something that Immuta is doing in the background is based on previous approvals, based on user attributes and other pieces of metadata. It's made a recommended determination based on all these things and says, what do we think the risk level is? And what do we think our recommended action is? In this case, we're saying the risk is considered low because a small number of very similar users have been granted access with no denials, indicating that this is likely a safe access to be granted, right? I can also choose a temporary approval if I wanted to. So I could select a duration for 1 month, 6 months, or custom. So I could say the user's only allowed to get access for a certain period of time, maybe a few weeks, and then they have to come back in. After that period of time, their access would be revoked, right? So again, there's a lot of different options here. Of course, I can deny. Something I think is also really useful is I can see the determination history. So if I click here, I can see Remy has requested quite a few times. This is a lot of my test users. Philip has been denied quite a few times, right? So I can see my determination history for this particular data product. I'm going to temporarily approved Remy for this use case, temporarily approved. And I'm going to say Remy gets access for 6 months. And I'm going to submit my determination. That's done. And if I switch back here to Remy and refresh my screen, what we'll see is we're now temporarily approved. So you can see I've been approved temporarily, and then also when it expires, which is February 9th, 2026. Beyond getting approved here in Immuta, what's happened in the background is Immuta's actually provisioned access for Remy, both within Snowflake and Databricks. So if I go back here to Databricks, where I previously did not have access, and I run this query again, you can see I now have access to my table here in Databricks. There's also masking policies in place. So beyond the marketplace and provisioning access to the data products, we have Immuta policies, Immuta data policies that are in place that are nulling out the claim ID. They're doing redaction on the diagnosis code. We have a row filter in place that's limiting our state, redaction for provider name, and we're also doing some rounding of the patient age right here. So again, traditional Immuta kind of data policies can live alongside marketplace provisioning to provide additional security around particularly sensitive columns or row filters, right, to help kind of slice and dice that data even further. So we've provided access here to medical claims. If I switch over to Snowflake, it's the same thing. So if I go here and try to request or run this query for medical procedures, I can see first name's redacted. I now have access to this table. Once again, we have Immuta masking policies in place that are redacting certain data elements. You may recall there was a guardrail policy in place. So if I go back to the marketplace here, there was a guardrail policy that's preventing access to genomics data. And you can see there are existing required policies on this data source, which I don't meet the criteria to get access to. So even though I requested access and was approved access for this data source, if I go here and I tried to query genomics expression data, I'm not going to get access. So that guardrail is in place, preventing my access to that data source. There's a lot more you can do with Immuta. There's a lot more advanced kind of use cases we can do with policies, masking policies, but this kind of covers the basic creating a data product, provisioning access, creating custom request forms, and then having a user coming in, requesting access, approving, and then ultimately gaining access within the data platform.